Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that brings you the secret histories and little-known fascinating facts and figures behind your favorite movies, music, TV shows, and more. We are your three bio-exorcists of big-ticket trivia. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. And today we are joined by, really, you know, if there's the fifth Beatle, there's the third TMI trivia. What are we? What's a T? I need a T word that begins with.
Stop it.
Titan. Taco Titan.
Titan.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Titans of talking.
Yeah. See, this is why. I am so happy to welcome with open arms and an open heart our very own producer, Mykal Alder June.
Hello.
Oh my God. Welcome.
I'm so happy to be here with you guys.
Oh, we're so happy to finally have it. Because I feel so bad because June is the one who makes us sound coherent. And so, and she'll be listening through to all these episodes and texting us all these incredible insights that we should have brought up and all these great jokes and all these things. And it's like, okay, well, you know what? Finally, June is visiting New York and staying with me. And you know what? It's time. I can't believe it's taken this long. And we're talking about one of her very favorite movies.
It took a trip through the hellmouth of JFK to get me on the show.
Yeah, a surprising amount of similarities with the afterlife as depicted by this movie. This is shockingly the first Tim Burton project that we've done. Yeah, I will forever be not a Nightmare Before Christmas kid because I was exactly the right age for that movie to come out and break my little heart as a little spooky child. And I think as an adult, I have glommed onto Ed Wood as like the most kind of mature and least annoying of the iconic Tim Burton movies.
I can definitely understand that.
But I just...
Well, what are we talking about? I don't think we actually told folks what we're talking about.
Bio-exorcist was the giveaway, you herb. What other... That's another thing I love about this movie. That is not a recognized term in anything other than the Beetlejuice cinematic universe. What is a bio-exorcist? Although I guess...
Does the Ghostbusters have that?
No, because the ghosts aren't trying to get rid of the living in Ghostbusters, or at least they're not referred to that way. Maybe The Frighteners by Peter Jackson with Michael J. Fox kind of takes like a similar tack to it, but I don't really think... I think that term is entirely unique to this movie. Yeah, I don't know. I love this movie when I was a kid. It is so aggressively weird. It has this bizarre mythos that it doesn't really explain. It's gruesome in some ways, but as you referred to it earlier, in a kind of haunted house kitsch way.
Orchard Haunted House, I think is what I said. Hayride Haunted House.
Yes, Hayride Haunted House. But yeah, I mean, it's honestly funny to me it took this long for this movie to get a sequel, which is the other reason we're talking about it, is that this year, news finally broke that Beetlejuice 2 is happening, which is very sad or great for Michael Keaton, depending on how you're looking at it, because he has now fully become the character that he was playing in Birdman, which is an actor forced into rehashing his old roles for rent money. First in as Batman in The Flash, and now as Beetlejuice in Beetlejuice 2. Beat harder.
I just want to make an observation that I didn't realize. This movie came out in March. I would have assumed that it was a Halloween movie.
You know, other than the death, it's not like a seasonal film either. I mean, it's I can't really even like. Doesn't even have that much of a sense of time. Like if you were like, what time of year does Beetlejuice take place in? I would be like, June?
It takes place in a kitchen. I don't know. It's seasonless.
Yeah, exactly.
It takes place in an afterlife desert.
Yep.
And in waiting rooms.
Yeah. And a farmhouse, and in what is I think they do make mention of it being Connecticut. Anyway. So, June, what you were very attached to this film.
Yes, this was one of the few movies that I watched over and over and over again when I was a kid. My parents adhered to the outdated already medium of the Betamax, onto which they recorded all sorts of movies from HBO's free weekends. So I watched a lot of Goonies,
Mhm.
a lot of Indiana Jones, and Beetlejuice was maybe the top of that holy trinity. And yeah, so between the movie and the Saturday morning cartoon that later followed it,
Mhm.
and my secretly wanting to be Lydia Dietz, I was very enamored with this movie when I was like 7 through 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I believe you dressed up as
Oh yeah, I gotta see this.
For Halloween, when I was 9, I really wanted to be Beetlejuice for Halloween. This was 2 or 3 years after the movie came out. There was no way to pull together like a Beetlejuice costume. And Halloween night, my mom took me out to a Meijer, like in our suburban Michigan town.
what's a
And
Meijer?
It's kind of like Kroger or Target.
Mm.
Okay.
And we were going through the racks of children's clearance pajama aisle, and those telltale white and black stripes jumped out, and there was like this old Saturday morning cartoon pajama like merchandising tie-in. So I got to be Beetlejuice for Halloween wearing pajamas around my neighborhood. And then immediately after Halloween, we moved down to Georgia. So I woke up at dawn, still dressed
November 1st.
still dressed as Beetlejuice, somewhere driving through Kentucky.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the lost like level on Oregon Trail.
Well, you can. So looking at this picture, and first of all, the makeup is incredible. But looking at this
The
picture,
corpse paint.
yeah, the corpse paint. Looking at this picture, you can tell it immediately. It's from the animated series because in the movie, he wears a white shirt
White,
with it,
yeah.
and then in the series had him with the pink undergarment. You know, his pink ensemble is his wedding look in the movie.
Yeah, we should say for the listeners at home that I have sent out a photograph of me dressed as Beetlejuice at 9 years old.
and it is perfect.
We will definitely be sharing that when we post this. Put that in the show notes.
Okay.
I don't have that level of attachment to this. I feel bad because after all these wonderful things that both of you said about how much this movie means to you, and unlike you, Heigl, I take no pleasure in denigrating stuff that you actually like. I didn't really engage with this movie much as a kid. Spooky, scary, creepy stuff. It really was never my thing, and just so the general tenor of this movie just kind of freaked me out. And plus, I took the title literally, so I thought for a time that this movie had something to do with juice made from beetles, which just grossed me out a lot. So that was another part of the reason why I didn't really watch it. So I don't have much to share from the childhood perspective, but I would like to say that the husband of my first boss wrote the Broadway musical version of Beetlejuice from a few years back. His name is Anthony King, and his wife is the incredibly talented writer and podcaster Kate Spencer, who is the co-host of the very popular podcast Forever 35 and the author of the New York Times best-selling book In a New York Minute. Although I don't know if it was best-selling. If it's not, it should be. If it's not, it will be after this. Shout out. But yeah, she was my first boss and editor at VH1.com a long time ago, and she's awesome. So shout
She's going to go to her publisher, like, where did all these sales come from? Oh, you got the TMI bump, honey.
I would like to say June, out of the three of us, does the best cigar chomping executive.
Oh.
I mean, the cigar chomping executive in this story is David Geffen, which is like more of a like little boy, like a small boy. But
Please, sir, I'd like some more Beetlejuice.
well, from the much darker original shooting script to the perils of building a bridge in Vermont for the film, and that's not a setup to a joke, to the gross look that they landed on for the titular character, and an update on its long-delayed sequel, here's everything you didn't know about Beetlejuice. Goth icon Tim Burton, or at least mainstream goth icon, sort of goth for dummies icon. I like Tim Burton. I just, he's not like...
It's so easy to give him
He's not Eisterzende Neubauten, Or like the birthday party. He's not like legit goth. He's like, your mom's idea of goth. Anyway.
He's Hot Topic.
Yeah. He was born in Burbank, made some shorts while he was a student at the California Institute of the Arts, where he was studying animation. And one of them, called Stalk of the Celery Monster, which I have not seen, managed to get in the eyes of the House of Mouse, and they offered him an apprenticeship at its animation division, where he picked up work as an animator, storyboard artist, graphic designer, art director, and concept artist on films like The Fox and the Hound, Tron, and even The Black Cauldron, although you would be hard-pressed to identify his touch on any of those, except for possibly The Black Cauldron. And so while at Disney in 1982, Burton made his first short, Vincent, which is a 6-minute black and white stop-motion film based on a poem written by him, which depicts a young boy who fantasizes that he is his hero, Vincent Price, and it was narrated by Vincent Price.
I thought it was an animated version of the Don McLean song, Vincent.
You would.
Starry Night, yeah.
Yeah, you would, wouldn't you?
Jude's head is literally in her hands right now.
And
Vince, two disapproving goth-adjacent friends.
Vincent,
I can only lighten so much.
Vincent Price is in... his last role is in Edward Scissorhands, right?
I think you're right.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so that's a friendship that's very adorable. And then, so 2 years later, Tim Burton's next short, Frankenweenie, which is about a young boy's attempt to resurrect his beloved dog after it is hit by a car, comes out. Well, sort of doesn't. Despite the film starring Shelley Duvall and Daniel Stern, Disney fired him for using company resources to make his weird little goth German expressionist passion projects, which is
That's such a great premise for a movie, though.
Sad and hilarious. Well, I think they see. This just proves I haven't kept up with him in like a decade and change. Didn't they make a CGI, a live action Frankenweenie?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
It was
2012.
I believe they showed it in front of some Disney feature. I can't remember, though.
It might have even been Alice in Wonderland.
It may have been.
Did you ever see The Family Dog, his short-lived animated sitcom?
Tim Burton's Family what?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, look this up. It's so interesting. I think they only aired, I want to say, like...
Oh, Brad Bird. He exec produced this, but it was the first collaboration between Spielberg and Burton, and created by Brad Bird. That is wild. One critic called it one of the biggest fiascos in television animation history on both a creative and commercial level, in spite, but in many ways because, of the high-powered talent behind the project. Savage.
So I put that on my tombstone.
So while nobody at Disney liked him, the film and Burton did have one prominent fan, and that was Paul Rubens.
Naturally.
Pee Wee Herman himself. Rubens chose Burton to direct the cinematic spin-off of his show, the film Pee Wee's Big Adventure, which was made on a budget of $8 million.
Jesus, that's like nothing, right?
That's pocket change. That's lint from some executive's couch compared to other films. But it managed to gross more than $40 million at the North American box office. So Burton was all of a sudden very bankable off of a Pee Wee Herman movie,
which I love.
That had perhaps the most terrifying moment of my childhood.
Large Marge.
Of course.
Yeah. I was Large Marge. It was a couple's costume. Me and my girlfriend, she was Pee Wee, I was Large Marge. And I took glasses and we cut like 2 styrofoam spheres and hot glued them to, where the eyes would be, and just put a dot in the middle of each one, and walked around with my mouth open and these huge eyes. It's pretty horrifying. Put that in the show notes too, along with your Halloween outfit.
See, that's way scarier than mine. So Burton is all of a sudden a hot property, and so he's pulled into script development for the movie Batman. But while Warner Brothers was happy to pay him to tinker on the script, they were a lot less willing to greenlight the film. So he still didn't have a next project. He said to the Independent in 2018, "I was being offered any bad comedy. It was a case of you do a bad comedy, you get offered all of the bad comedies."
Is Batman Is Tim Burton's Batman rather the one that Prince did the soundtrack for?
Yep.
Yes.
I just learned because I was working on something about Prince. The only reason he took that job was because he had a crush on Kim Basinger.
Yeah. I think
and then didn't he tried to record an album with her?
Yeah.
And it was terrible, and he shelved it because she is not a singer; she's an actor.
I was just reading on about Tim Burton's time at Disney. He was such a square peg in a round hole there that he became visibly depressed at work. He slept in a closet while he was there. And another new animator, Andreas Dea, was teamed with him to essentially try and get him up to speed. That's the guy who did the concept art for Beast.
I was gonna say, I thought he also did the chest hair for Gaston.
Yeah. So he worked on Beauty and the Beast. But yeah, imagine you're like a young upstart at Disney, and you get this Robert Smith looking guy who's been falling asleep in closets because he's so depressed, and they're like, yeah, make it work. So anyway, the original script for Beetlejuice was written by a guy named Michael McDowell, who has a bit of a career as like a horror author. I didn't read too much about everything that he's done, but among this, he wrote the script for The Jar, which was an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents that was directed by Burton, funnily enough. The original draft for this was out there. Beetlejuice was a winged demon, and his human appearance was that of a Middle Eastern man. He avowedly wanted to just kill the Dietz family and not just scare them. And the accident, spoilers for a 30-year-old film, the Maitlands die in like the opening minutes of the film. And that was, I think they died in a house fire. Their death was very graphic. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Lydia was going to die in a fire and be a dead ghost daughter to the Maitlands. And Beetlejuice wanted to rape her. So that was the original script that they were working with. And it was so bad or so whatever that Larry Wilson, who is the guy who has a story by credit on it, has talked to in an interview about bringing this first draft to an executive at Universal who told him, "You're developing into a very good executive. You've got great taste in material. Why are you going to squander all that for this piece of shit?"
This is reminding me of the fact that, like, the movie Cool Runnings, the Jamaican bobsledding movie, had a way darker original script that had...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, one of them was going to get hooked on smack or something.
Hell yeah.
Oh, no. It was the screenwriter who was hooked on smack while he was writing it. And the original script was way darker as a result. So, oh my God, I cannot even imagine this movie we could have gotten.
This guy...
Or could never have gotten.
This guy, Michael McDowell, was once blurbed by Stephen King as the finest writer of paperback originals in America today. And one of his last, his unfinished novel was finished by Stephen King's wife, Tabitha King. So, go figure. He also wrote...
Okay.
So good bones.
He also wrote the novelization of the film Clue.
I love how much you love your novelizations.
Oh, man,
your film
I was a big
novelizations.
novelization kid growing up.
Blade.
Yeah. Blade. That book taught me how to curse. So Larry Wilson's other gig was teaching extension courses at UCLA, and they had like a script. He ran like a script development class, and through a young woman taking that class whose name was Marjorie Lewis. She was a development executive at the Geffen Film Company. And in early 85, Larry Wilson brought Marjorie Lewis the script for Beetlejuice and asked her to read it. And she said she was blown away. She said to The Ringer in 2018. And so much so that she dropped it on the desk of the then Geffen president, Eric Eisner, and told him that she would quit if they didn't buy it. And they did, just as Burton was wrapping production on Pee-wee's Big Adventure for Warner Brothers, the Geffen Film Division's parent company. So it was a case of a lot of the timelines converging. And Burton told Rolling Stone in 1988, in a feature for the making of Beetlejuice, "The things that interest me most are the things that potentially won't work. A lot of people have ragged on the story of Beetlejuice, but when I read it, I thought, wow, this is sort of interesting. It's very random. It doesn't follow what I would consider the Spielberg story structure. I guess I have to watch it more because I'm intrigued by things that are perverse. Like, I was intrigued that there was no story. Jordan, take the next ones.
Burton liked the bones of the story, but he jettisoned McDowell and Wilson, and he brought on a famed script doctor named Warren Scarron to bring things more into line with what he envisioned. Scarron's credited with a lot of punch-ups in the 80s. He helped Top Gun with stuff like the Righteous Brothers scene and rewrites. And he got Tom Cruise back on board with romance and more emotional development for Maverick, because I guess Tom Cruise just wanted to be flying the large planes. Fast planes, excuse me. The less successful follow-up to Fast Car. And also burnished Jack Nicholson's Joker dialogue for Tim Burton's Batman movie. Burton met Scarron in Austin in 1986 or 1987 and spent a weekend banding about ideas for the film of Beetlejuice. Scarron introduced music to the film. He recommended that Lydia sing Percy Sledge's When a Man Loves a Woman at the end of the film. And they also arrived at the afterlife as a vision of a dull bureaucracy and made Beetlejuice more of an annoying trickster character than, a winged demon who's killing and raping. And did he eat? I feel like he ate something that he shouldn't have eaten in one of the early drafts. Maybe not.
Did you guys see that that tweet or image macro or meme or whatever that was that's dating myself even calling it an image macro, that was just a picture of like Beetlejuice and Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber and then in The Mask, and it was like, you used to be able to make movies on a premise of what if a guy was just really annoying.
What was they mentioned earlier that Tim Burton was saying that he didn't think that the early script of Beetlejuice followed a Spielberg story structure. What does that mean?
A good one? Like a conventional one?
It has a beginning and a middle and an end.
Yeah.
And something with a father and a son.
Yeah. The main characters don't die in a car crash in the first 10 minutes.
So bolstering up the script of Beetlejuice, which, again, needed a lot of work, took a lot of work. For a lot of time on Beetlejuice, I felt like I was in court giving depositions, Tim Burton told The Independent. I remember having script meetings that lasted for like 24 hours over the course of 2 days. By the end of it, we were questioning every element. And hilariously, Warner Brothers just wanted to call the project House Ghosts. But Tim Burton nearly had an aneurysm when, as a joke, he suggested Scared Sheetless, and they wanted to go with that.
Scared Sheetless is
I
better.
think that's funny.
Scared Sheetless is better. But yeah, he's talked about I forget which interview. He doesn't give very many big in-depth interviews, but yeah, at one point, House Ghosts. So just that sounds like something we would pitch.
Is that even a pun that I'm not getting? Or
no, just a low effort.
Okay.
Thing. It sounds like something that we would pitch as a joke. One thing that I've never been clear.
I mean, it's kind of like House Guests.
Oh, sure.
But not close enough.
Yeah, it's like not enough to the
clever.
Yeah,
Such a fine line between stupid and clever.
something about house guests and fish smelling after 3 days. Is that what that? Isn't that simile something?
The old joke. Yeah.
Anyway, the movie could have even been even weirder though if Tim Burton had gotten his initial casting choice.
I just want to point out that Heigl has titled this section, I myself am strange and unusual. I love that. So Burton's initial choice for the title role was Sammy Davis Jr. Which I
just saying out loud sounds like a troll.
And in response, David Geffen reacted poorly. Burton said in an interview that when he pitched Sammy Davis Jr., that was the first time I ever heard crickets. Chirp, 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 chirp. So after ranting to Burton and Marjorie Lewis about why that would not work, David Geffen responded with Michael Keaton, which it feels odd to me. Like, I get it. At the same time, it feels odd to like that's a weird card move.
Yeah.
So like I see your Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah, and I'm
raising you, Michael Keaton. I'm raising you, Mr. Mom. So odd move. Keaton had a strong start to the decade with his hits like Night Shift in 1982, Mr. Mom in 83, but more recently had anchored the underwhelming and underperforming Touch and Go and a movie called Gung Ho in 86 and a movie called The Squeeze in 87.
Nope.
No idea. Have not seen any of these movies. And Keaton barely seemed to want to do it either. He turned down the role twice, telling The Independent, I didn't quite get it, and I wasn't looking to work, which that's some stones right there. Before accepting the role finally, I didn't understand what he was talking about, Keaton said to Charlie Rose in 2014. I said, I wish I could do it. You seem like a really nice guy, and I know that you're creative, but I don't get it. Funnily enough, producers also considered Dudley Moore. Can you imagine a Dudley Moore Beetlejuice?
Dudley Moore was in a movie. He was in the original Bedazzled in the 60s with Peter Cook. And Dudley Moore was like kind of the nebbishy guy the devil screws with. But I could almost, if you reframe it as like kind of like an English trickster. What was the movie with Phoebe Cates and Rick Mayall?
Oh, Drop Dead Fred.
Drop Dead Fred. Yeah, I almost see that. I could almost see that working.
I can see that. This is like the weird upside down version of what's the famous Dudley Moore movie?
Arthur.
Yeah.
As like the upside down version of Arthur. So producers were considering Dudley Moore, and also comedian Sam Kinison, which
that would have been awful. That would have immediately consigned
Kinnison's
this.
manager supposedly never bothered to inform Sam Kinison of the studio's interest. I imagine when Kinison finally learned about it, he screamed about it.
That probably would have immediately consigned this to the dustbin of history. Can you imagine how
absolutely
grating he would have been in this? Like,
just completely one note.
Yeah,
what are you talking
gacked
about?
out of his mind. Like, no.
Don't you just hate it when that happens?
Good move, Sam Kinnison's manager, circa 1985.
Thank you for saving us all from a terrible fate.
Well, back to Michael Keaton. I'm legally obligated to mention the fact that Michael Keaton's first show business job was working for Mr. Rogers as a stagehand.
Aww.
Oh, yeah.
That's why he's been in a bunch of like Mr. Rogers specials and documentaries. And also,
Mikey Keaty, that's so cute.
right? And I also didn't realize until watching that I think it was on Amazon or something, a docuseries on the Comedy Store, the famous club in LA. I had no idea that he was a stand-up that was like came up with the same class with David Letterman and Jay Leno and all those people in the late 70s. I didn't know that.
I don't think I knew he was from Pittsburgh. That's wild.
That's your takeaway?
Yes.
Okay.
More importantly.
So Burton was talking to the Independent in that aforementioned interview and said, Michael Keaton is a maniac, a live wire, and he's got those great eyes. And a lot of the stuff in the film was improvised. I would go over to Michael's house and the two of us would come up with jokes. It was really fun because we were essentially creating a character. And this improvisation that the two of them had going on in pre-pro continued on set with Keaton telling Rolling Stone, you show up on the set and you just go fucking nuts. It was rave acting. You rage for 12 or 14 hours, and then you go home tired and beat and exhausted. It was pretty damned cathartic. He also added, I started thinking about my hair.
My acting choices.
I wanted my hair to stand out, like I was wired and plugged in. And once I started getting that, I actually made myself laugh. And I thought, well, this is a good sign. This is kind of funny. And then I got the attitude. And once I got the basic attitude, it really started to roll, despite all of that. He only filmed for about 2 weeks, which that's hilarious.
Yeah, of the ad-libbing, he said, Alec Baldwin said that the part where he goes, he like hawks up a loogie and spits it into the inside of his jacket and then pats it and says, oh, I'll save that one for later. Alec Baldwin said he almost choked when he saw him do that.
And it's such an aside, too. It's such a throwaway joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first thing I remember writing about the character or saying to Keaton about the character was, he's Groucho Marx from hell.
Yeah.
Which that quote comes from Larry Wilson to Yahoo. Keaton has supposedly also said elsewhere that he was inspired by Bill Moseley's performance as Chop Top, one of the murderous rednecks in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which actually
it makes entirely too much sense. And it's really funny because it would have come out like right around that time. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is such a wild departure from the first one in terms of it's going for like this really insane. It's basically where Rob Zombie has gotten his entire career from. It's going for this really like funhouse, demented comedy. The poster was famously a parody of the Breakfast Club poster, and Bill Moseley is so obnoxious in that movie, and like it's so fun. It's so perfect to me that Michael Keaton would have seen it and been like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do that."
Does Michael Keaton have a coke problem? Just watching this movie kind of makes me think maybe.
It's possible. Apparently in the musical, one of the things in the musical that critics didn't like was Beetlejuice does a line. They thought that was in poor taste.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
So, Oscar-winning makeup artist V. Neal said that when she first copied some of Burton's sketches of the character onto Keaton, the results were actually too scary and not silly enough. We've talked a lot about Burton has talked a lot about German expressionism, but the film that's such a punchline these days. Portlandia has a whole sketch about people getting it from Netflix and never watching it. Is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And in that movie, you see the big like grease paint circles around the eyes, and so that was and the vertical lines of the suit. There's also parts of the architecture in the afterlife that have the sort of canted hallway angles descending into the distance. So that was it's a through line in all of Burton's career, but this was, I think, more than Pee-wee, the first movie where he really got to flex that as an influence. So they did make some changes. They went with pale yellow makeup bordering on white for his skin, pale green hair dye for the wig, purple and brown makeup for the giant under eye circles, and one very specific tool to make him look like he had mold on him, because Keaton and Burton decided that Beetlejuice lived under rocks. Neil recalled to Yahoo, "I sent a PA off to the hobby store and I said, get me some crushed green foam like they use on model kits for moss and stuff like that. I said, we'll put some moss in his hair. We'll just make it look like he crawled out from underneath a rock. So I got this crushed green foam and I painted up the areas where I wanted it to come out. I wanted it to look like he was creeping out from underneath his hairline and his neck and stuff. I just stuck it on wherever the glue was." Hollywood, gluing hobby foam onto your lead actor. Keaton, for some reason, also wanted Beetlejuice to have a broken nose, but the makeup team didn't have any prosthetic noses. But what they did have were prosthetic lips. So they just put fake lips on either side of his nose to make it look more bulbous. And one of Burton's Gnostic proclamations to Keaton that the character of Beetlejuice lived in every time period, but was of no time period. So Keaton got his wardrobe for the character by saying to the wardrobe department, he said, just send me a rack of stuff from every time period, like literally a whole rack, and I will just mix and match. And when he said, I think he said in a different interview that when he came onto set for the first time, he was worried that he'd pushed it too far with the look, and the crowd the crew just started chanting "juice" at him, which maybe they thought OJ was there that day. But that joke gonna land?
Test audiences.
Oh, okay. You were just giving it space to breathe.
I was, yeah. It's like in Annie Hall when Woody Allen snorts or sneezes and blows the cocaine everywhere. They got such a huge laugh in theaters that they had to
extend the frame.
add B-roll of palm trees or something afterwards because it was stepping on the next line in the next scene. Yeah, that's what I was doing. Test audiences responded so well to Michael Keaton, who amazingly doesn't appear in this movie until 45 minutes and is only on screen for something like 20 minutes, that audiences actually rejected the original ending that had him trapped in the Maitland's model home and plagued by sandworms. So a newer, more comedic ending with him in the afterlife waiting room was filmed.
Where he gets his head shrunk in.
I had that.
I
had that action figure. Of him with the shrunken head, and another fun fact: the legs. He's like seated in between a woman who has been bisected. I think she's supposed to be like a magician's assistant who died in an onstage accident, and the legs are played by Tim Burton's then girlfriend. Which, we'll get to this later, but Tim Burton must be slinging some dong like you wouldn't believe. Because that guy punches above his weight, man.
Helena Bonham
Carter. You know who
Carter.
his current girlfriend is? Monica friggin' Bellucci. I'm telling you, Tim Burton, monster dong. You heard it here first on TMI. That's our pool quote. Allegedly monster dong.
Allegedly.
He's probably just also like a nice guy. Jordan, what are your thoughts on Tim Burton's monster dong?
That's what played the Sandbergs, actually.
I was not able to find out if those are an obvious Dune rip, but they seem like an obvious Dune rip. Not just because Lydia comes back in riding it at the end, desert planet, giant worms. Feels like maybe I just see Dune and everything.
No, I think that this one is pretty plainly obvious. That is funny that she would be the
Shai Hulud.
What is it? Muad'Dib?
Oh, Paul Muad'Dib. Paul Muad'Dib. Yeah.
Paul Muad'Dib.
Now I'm just looking at like those listicles that are like, I'm looking at one right now from theclever.com. 15 beautiful women who fell in love with ugly guys.
I didn't say he was ugly. I just said he's punching above his weight.
I knew what it meant. Felicity Huffman and William H. Macy. Polina Porskova.
Oh, Rick Ocasek. That was a crazy one. Yeah, that dude looked like a praying mantis.
Yeah. A lot of these are like old rock stars like Ronnie Wood who are married to like 25-year-old ballerinas. That's not fair. Salma Hayek and a guy who looks like Gene Hackman.
Oh, but that dude's like loaded. He's like a billionaire, I think. Salma Hayek's husband.
Sure.
Well, yes.
But okay. Julia Roberts and
I love it.
a guy. No, but Lyle Lovett was going to be my runner-up. Amber Tamblyn and David Cross.
Oh, come on.
Christina Hendricks and that guy who was the Snosberries Taste Like Snosberries from Super Troopers. What's his name? Jeffrey Arnond? Yeah. Kristen Bell and Dax Shepard. Mary-Kate Olsen and Sarkozy.
Dax Shepard is not a bad-looking guy.
Tina Fey and a guy who looks like Peter Dinklage.
Oh.
Padma Lakshmi. Padma Lakshmi was with Salman Rushdie?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Post fatwa.
And number one on this list is Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas?
Nah. Michael Douglas was swanging some hog in the 80s.
Oh, absolutely. He the Gordon Gekko. Come on. So the role of the goth teenager, Lydia Deetz. I am jumping on this.
Please.
The role of the goth teenager, Lydia Deetz, was difficult to fill as well. So also up for the role was Sarah Jessica Parker. I have a lot to say about that. Brooke Shields, Jennifer Connelly would have killed this, and Molly Ringwald all turned down the role. Juliette Lewis auditioned for the part. She would have been good.
She does too much.
But the person who got closest to it and didn't get it was Alyssa Milano, who admitted to HuffPost Live in 2016 that she really wanted that part. You can't have it. It was between the two of us, and Winona Ryder actually got the part. I always wonder what would have happened differently in my life had that worked out. Not that I would want it to be any different, but it's just an interesting thought game. I believe you. Burton had just seen 16-year-old Winona Ryder debut in the 1986 coming-of-age story, Lucas. In an interview with Marie Claire, Ryder said that she was bullied at school before her film career and that she had hoped that her appearance in Beetlejuice would make her more popular. It did not. I remember thinking, oh, it's like the #1 movie. This is going to make things great at school, but it made things worse. They called me a witch.
That's so
honey. I know what you're
That's
talking
so
about.
sad for her.
Co-writer Larry Wilson revealed in an oral history for CBC Radio that he found inspiration for Lydia while seeing, again, Robert Smith is going to just be a tertiary character throughout this entire episode. He found inspiration for Lydia while seeing The Cure perform in concert and looking at the young women in the audience, which, of course.
I just want to shout out Mermaids with Winona Ryder and Cher.
You love
Movie
that
rules.
movie.
I mean, Cher in that movie? Oh my God.
You've mentioned that movie quite a lot. actually.
I know your type.
Just saying.
Have you not seen it?
Not in years.
Oh, it holds up. Mermaids is great. Angelica Houston was initially cast as the Dietz family's art-damaged matriarch, but dropped out due to illness. So Catherine O'Hara, the great Catherine O'Hara, who also initially passed on the part, nobody wanted to be in this goddamn movie. She came on board when Tim Burton flew out to meet with her personally. Burton later told The Independent, the only person who initially really wanted to do it was Gina Davis, though it did end up working out for Catherine O'Hara, who met and eventually married production designer Bo Welsh while working on Beetlejuice.
Yeah, apparently the scene where Beetlejuice eats the fly is a wink at the fact Gina Davis had been in The Fly. Super funny to me.
That's great.
But yeah, I love the fact that she was the only one who was like gung-ho for this.
Catherine O'Hara has a pretty great anecdote about her non-audition for Beetlejuice. She's talking to the New Yorker very recently. Said, I'd been asked to audition for Beetlejuice. I had all these calls with David Geffen, who was a producer. I didn't know him at the time. Out of ignorance, I was like, who is this guy? He keeps bugging me. He keeps calling and saying, this is a part for you. You should be doing this. He kept calling. Then they said they wanted me to meet this guy, Tim Burton. I didn't know Tim Burton. And finally, I was depressed at home and I had nothing going. I said, okay, I'll go to audition. I'll go meet him. I was so sad that I decided to meet Tim Burton. That's an incredible metric for depression. So she flew to LA from Toronto and I rented a car, she said. The address was in Burbank. I drove for hours. I thought, what kind of director is this far from show business? I was so late. I got lost. There was no cell phone. I had to pull over somewhere and find a phone booth and phone my agent. Finally, 2 hours late, I got to Burbank. There was a note on the door from Tim Burton. It said, I'm sorry. I waited as long as I could. I go back home to Toronto, and a few weeks later, they offer me the part.
That turned out well for her. Funnily enough, though, Gina Davis, despite being stoked on the film, wasn't Burton's initial choice for the character of Barbara Maitland. I read that Kirstie Alley was, and that she couldn't get out of her Cheers contract to shoot. But adorably, this was the first set on which Gina Davis's parents got to actually come see her work. The Beetlejuice was shot in Vermont, and her parents lived close enough by that they came and visited her on set, bearing baked goods for Gina to distribute to the rest of the cast. She wrote this in her memoir. And then an assistant director used her parents as extras in a scene to keep them busy. It's adorable. Alec Baldwin, who plays the other half of the Maitlands, did not have high hopes for the film. He was talking about it to GQ, and he said, when we did Beetlejuice, I had no idea what it was about. I thought all of our careers are going to end with the release of this film. Maybe we're all going to be dead. Hilarious. Oh, yeah. That hasn't aged well. Baldwin's a prick.
No. Yes, he is.
Tim Burton then proceeded to stack the rest of the cast with his favorite celebrities from bygone eras. 60s crooner Robert Goulet and talk show host Dick Cavett.
Robert Goulet.
Are given roles as the Dietz snobby friends. And Burton hounded Hollywood Silver Age actress Sylvia Sidney incessantly until she agreed to play the salty, undead social worker Juno.
I just want to praise the fact that you just said Sylvia Sidney incessantly.
I'm a goddamn professional.
Yeah.
Her appearance in Mars Attacks a few years later in 1996 was her last role. So she made friends with Tim Burton. There's a piece about the making of Beetlejuice for The Ringer, and someone recalls Sylvia Sidney opening a gift basket she'd gotten from the hotel while chain smoking and just exclaiming, "What the f*** am I supposed to do with a pineapple?" Jordan, take Dick Cavett. I know you love Dick Cavett.
I love Dick Cavett. Dick Cavett actually saved the day when making this movie. It was when they were filming the iconic dinner scene. He told Yahoo that Tim Burton was running into difficulty getting the final shots in which the shrimp cocktail turns into hands that grab the guests and hosts' faces into their bowls. Because SFX workers were under the table and couldn't actually see who they were grabbing, they kept missing their marks. So Dick Cavett suggested they film that part in reverse, and Burton thought that was a great idea and decided to do just that. He filmed some takes of the hands grabbing the stars' faces, then lowering back down into the table. And then, I don't know who this is, so Heigl, tell us about Jeffrey Jones.
Oh, do we have to talk about Jeffrey Jones?
I don't know if it's Jeffrey Jones.
Heigl, tell us about the pederast. Jeffrey Jones,
Oh.
the actor who plays Lydia's dad,
Oh.
and perhaps more famously, the dean in Ferris Bueller.
Oh,
Yeah, he was arrested for possession of child pornography in 2002 and accused of a 17-year-old boy who was 14 at the time the offense allegedly occurred of trying to get Jeffrey wanted to take some bathing suit area pictures of this youth. Jones,
Can I just say, sometimes you can judge a book by a cover.
he does have that aura about him. Jones pleaded no contest to a charge of soliciting a minor, and the misdemeanor charge of possession of child pornography was dropped. But despite getting off relatively lightly with a 5-year probationary period, he was arrested twice for failing to update his sex offender status, first in Florida in 2004, and then 6 years later in California. So, folks, watch out for Jeffrey Jones. He could be anywhere.
We should have cut that off at the pass and just arrested him after Howard the Duck.
Oh, God.
So, that unpleasantness aside, moving on. Principal photography on Beetlejuice began March 11th, 1987. Beetlejuice's budget was $15 million with just $1 million given over to visual effects work, which, knowing the visual effects in this movie, that is very surprising to me. Considering the scale and scope of the effects, which included stop motion, replacement animation, prosthetic makeup, puppetry, blue screen. It was always Burton's intention to make the style similar to the B movies that he grew up with as a child. He said, I wanted to make them look cheap and purposely fake looking, he said to Mark Shapiro in '88. We went big and more personal with them. What people will see are effects that are, in a sense, a step backwards. They're crude, they're funky, but they're also very personal. Aww. Case in point, the animatronic snake that attacks them, the banister that turns into a snake, was actually built before Keaton was cast. Producers were concerned that the audiences wouldn't connect that the snake was simply a random monster, so they had to pivot and outfit it with a brand new head that looks like Keaton as Beetlejuice, and then they reshot it.
Yeah, they for the scene when the Maitlands come back into their home after drowning and realize they don't have any reflections, they just reversed the set. Like they pulled the wall back around, and they just moved one of the walls back so that they could film it through the mirror. It's just really like just old timey, like the shit they would do, back in the day. Tim Burton had wanted to hire a guy named Anton Furst as production designer after being impressed with his work on Neil Jordan's pre-Crying Game masterpiece, the fairy tale sex drama, The Company of Wolves, fairy tale werewolf sex drama, I should say, and also Full Metal Jacket, another movie you may have heard of. Although Furst was committed elsewhere, and so Burton went with Bo Welch. This turned out to be a fruitful collaboration. The pair continued to work together on Edward Scissorhands and Batman Returns. Bo Welch told Uproxx, when I met Tim, it was like a breath of fresh air in terms of liberating me from dreary realism. He would push me towards German expressionism and reference other movies. He was always a fan of the old horror movies, but he would view them with a sense of humor. In that period when you try and wrap your head around his aesthetic, you learn. It was a fantastic experience that I changed the way I approach movies from then on.
I'm really curious, Heigl, because I think among the three of us, you are the horror movie connoisseur. So can you maybe talk about like Burton as like sort of a conduit?
It is interesting.
Like the person, like he's the filmmaker to horror movies as like Tarantino is to Grindhouse movies.
He isn't. I don't think he comes from, I think he's of the age that he missed the Grindhouse stuff. Because not a lot of his movies have that really nasty 70s sensibility. He's definitely like an atomic age 50s B guy. And I think it's an interesting divide because even though he's sort of the same age as some of the people who we associate with the big 70s auteur era of horror, like John Carpenter and Wes Craven, it's just like they were freshmen when he was a senior or vice versa thing, because like their set of influences are so different. Even though, a lot of people talk about German expressionism, like, I really wanted to use the angles you find in German expressionism. And also like, Another big one is Night of the Hunter. Like if you talk to scratch any like 6 horror directors and they'll 5 of them will say, well, I'm really influenced by the lighting and use of shadow in Night of the Hunter. So you see that a lot.
Isn't one of John Carpenter's big ones?
John Carpenter, weirdly enough, is obsessed with, and this is what I say. This is why, again, it's like 2 roads diverged in a wood, because John Carpenter's influences were westerns. He was obsessed with Howard Hawks and Rio Bravo and like The Searchers and stuff. So again, same period of media, like the 50s and stuff. Just Tim Burton was like, I like the flying saucer men pictures and the guys in rubber suits. And John Carpenter was like, I just like westerns, but I'll make spooky movies instead of a western. I don't think he's ever made a pure western, except for maybe John Carpenter's Vampires, which is a real piece of shit. But Burton is really funny because, being from California and not from like the dismal industrial environs that influence like David Lynch or the Midwest, where everything is just f***ed up and sad, I guess. Citation needed. Sorry to our listeners in the Midwest. You get that like 50s lounge vibe and like rayon shirts and vibraphone music instead of like slasher stuff. Like I could never imagine Tim Burton doing a slasher. Even something like Sleepy Hollow, which is probably as close as he would ever actually get to that, is so much more informed by like
Hammer horror films.
Exactly, gothic horror. And that's the big thing that people he's probably I don't think I've read interviews where he's talked about it, but I wager this Hammer 60s stuff was a big thing for him as well. People in frock coats.
Yeah, I'm thinking now about the aesthetics of like Edward Scissorhands, the pastel houses, the just the California vibe.
Yeah, it's Orange County by way of Transylvania. So to find the fictional town of Winter River, Connecticut, in which Beetlejuice is set, early on in production, Tim Burton, production designer Bo Welch, and line producer Richard Hashimoto went location scouting in Vermont. And in Bo Welch's words, they drove aimlessly from one end of Vermont to the other. Eventually, we went into a couple of bookstores or gas stations and kept seeing this postcard over and over for this little town called East Corinth, Vermont. We saw it enough times where we thought, well, that one looks great. Art director Tim Duffield finished interior sets in Los Angeles and then flew to East Corinth to dress the town and construct the Maitland's home. The hardest part of all this was that they couldn't find a town that had a covered bridge, like your classic archetypal New England covered bridge thing. So they just built one, and the weather did not cooperate. Duffield said, we kept having thunderstorms. We had to build a big dam to control the water level, and a thunderstorm would come by and blow it all away. But the town still has a lot of the stuff that we left there. Just like filming in, what was it, Nambia or, Tunisia for Star Wars. Jordan, take us home.
Welch and Duffield also described their vision of the afterlife as, quote, the DMV through a German expressionist lens. Welch came up with the concept of the Johnson Wax Building in Oklahoma, which was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, with these posts that were spread out at the top.
They look like golf. They look like
and
golf
that's all
tees.
built in.
They look like if this.
Oh my God!
In this
you're
building,
right.
it just looks like they're pillars that are skinny at the bottom and blossom at the top, and it just looks like the whole interior is supported by golf tees.
And those are all built in, but they're also extended by a matte painting. And I love how much you love matte painting in describing special effects. Is that your favorite film special effect?
It's either that or the smoke tank. I do love I love the smoke tank.
The smoke tank looks badass.
Yeah. Once you start seeing,
what were we just talking about that for?
Raiders,
Indiana Jones.
Raiders,
Indiana Jones, yeah.
Close Encounter. It's the opening credits in The Thing.
Right.
Love a smoke tank.
As for why most of the dead are like, kind of candy colored, Tim Burton wanted them to look like Necco wafers. Friend of the pod, Necco wafers, made from my hometown, Boston, Massachusetts. Went out of business, stopped making them, and then somebody paid like $5, and now they have the rights to make them, and they're like trying to rebuild the factory in Boston. There's a little place called Necco Lane. Yeah,
a truly disgusting candy.
Yes,
delicious chalk flavored catechism wafers.
Is it candy flavored chalk or chalk flavored candy?
Yeah,
I don't know which.
It's your Boston ass. It's your,
Damn
come
thing,
on.
yeah. Fun fact, Welch's sculptures he created for Delia have proven so iconic that people have already stolen them off the set of the currently shooting sequel.
I tried and so hard to find an interview with him where he talks about what he was influenced by for those sculptures. I could not find it. Very bummed about it, but they are iconic for anyone who if you know, you know. Lydia Dietz. Shouts to Lydia.
If you insist on scaring people, do it with your sculpture. So getting the Maitlands to their caseworker in the afterlife proved to be confusing. We just couldn't figure it out, screenwriter Larry Wilson told The Independent. I kept coming up with more convoluted ways that they could escape the house, and Mykal would just sit there and say, no. I finally got really mad and said, well, what do you want them to do? Draw an effing door? And we just started laughing because that was perfect. And if you recall from the movie, that's exactly what they do.
Isn't that also what she does in Pan's Labyrinth?
Ooh.
I think you're right.
And it must be said, in Welch's words, towards the end of the movie, Tim told me, we were shooting in Vermont. You should ask Catherine out. And I said, what? He said, yeah, you should ask her out. It didn't even occur to me that I was even supposed to talk to the actors. But since Tim told me to, I did. And then we dated and we're married and we're here today. So good on you.
I know. If
Welch.
nothing else, Beetlejuice gave us the happy marriage of Catherine O'Hara and Bo Welch.
I love that for them.
Yeah, it's adorable. As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages. Jordan, I know you want to do this.
I've been waiting for this, yes. Heigl's titled this section, Come, Mr. Tallyman, Tally Me Banana. And that's because we're going to talk about one of my favorite people, Harry Belafonte. June and I were just talking about Harry Belafonte earlier today.
Oh, yes. The
clip on the Smothers Brothers.
The beatings in Chicago in 68. Yeah. Famous, like, not just as a singer, but as a civil rights icon.
Insane level of activism, considering just how straight-laced mainstream everything was back then. So also we learned, as we learned in our We Are the World episode, architect of the We Are the World charity single. So, I mean, pound for pound, when you really think about it, probably raised more money for charity than,
anyone.
On the short list of celebrities, I'd have to say. So, we
take
love a
that,
Harry
Bob
Belafonte.
Geldof.
Take that, Bono. But we're going to investigate right now the most iconic scene in Beetlejuice, in which the Maitlands turn a dinner party into a show-stopping possession, jazz hands, thanks to Harry Belafonte's Deo, the Banana Boat song. Can either one of you give us a Deo?
Deo. I'm sorry, that was
me
more.
Said that, me
that's
said
more
that,
Freddie
me said
Mercury.
that. Daylight come and me want go home. Just watching that come out of Catherine O'Hara's face and her performance, like, she deserves an Oscar for that scene alone. Just the way that she's like shocked by it. It's so perfect scene.
Now, for the song itself, it dates back to 1952. The Caribbean singer Edric Connor recorded it first, calling it
Daylight.
But it's obviously Harry Belafonte's song in the popular consciousness. So in 1986, David Geffen, who remember was the producer behind this film, or at least ran the studio that produced it, called Harry personally and explained the film to him. Belafonte later told Pitchfork in 2018, I never had a request like that before. We talked briefly. I liked the idea of Beetlejuice. I liked him. No one said that about David Geffen before. And I agreed to do it. What was particularly attractive was that he wanted to use my voice.
I desperately want a recording of this film.
to be a fly on that wall.
A man who has done nothing for charity as far as I'm No, I don't know. Maybe he has. Belafonte's songs are used all throughout Beetlejuice. During the opening scene, Alec Baldwin listens to Sweetheart from Venezuela, and shortly thereafter, dances to Man Smart, Woman Smarter, before the real estate broker interrupts. And after the couple realize they're dead, Deo plays faintly as Gina Davis flips through the handbook for the recently deceased, planting the song in viewers' heads. And then, of course, Winona Ryder celebrates acing a math test by having her ghost parents possess her so she can sing Jump in the Line, Shake Senora, which is a song that Heigl requested I play when I DJ'd his wedding 2 years ago.
And it killed.
And it killed. Yes.
So the addition in the original script for that dinner party possession, there wasn't even supposed to be music. Screenwriter Larry Wilson told Pitchfork that when he and McDowell, their concept for the dinner party scene was that one of the guests spilled a glass of wine on a rug with a floral design, and then the rug sprouted vines and wrapped up the guests, which is, visually appealing, doesn't have quite the same verve. So the addition of the music is believed to have been the work of the punch-up writer we mentioned earlier, Warren Scarron, but he did not envision it with Harry Belafonte. The dinner scene was supposed to feature the Ink Spots, 1939's hit If I Didn't Care, and as we mentioned earlier, Lydia was supposed to sing When a Man Loves a Woman at the end of the film. But
is that Ink Spots song? Is that the song that opens up the Shawshank Redemption?
Ooh, great pool.
You might be right.
If I didn't care more than words could say. If I didn't care, would I feel this way?
Jordan?
Moving on.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, yeah.
Good to hear.
So
good to hear.
Geffen exec Marjorie Lewis, though, told The Ringer that these songs were prohibitively expensive. Every time somebody heard the words David Geffen, she said, they raised the price. Jeffrey Jones told Pitchfork that Catherine O'Hara was the person who suggested Calypso would bring more energy to the scene. She really is the MVP of this film. Bob Badami, the film's music editor, told Pitchfork that Tim Burton worried about the scene a lot. He didn't think it was very funny. And obviously, he needn't have worried. The scene and the film's success prompted a resurgence in Belafonte's career. He told Pitchfork, everywhere I went for about a year, I had kids all over me. Oh, the guy from Beetlejuice. Wiping their hands full of tomato ketchup and mustard on my clothes. That is not a quote I made up. That is in the actual article. I have no idea why that is his recollection of his career resurgence following Beetlejuice, was children with their hands full of tomato ketchup and mustard. But he did say...
Because, if you know Belafonte, he's always dressed impeccably.
Impeccable linen white
and he's
suits.
always playing hot dog festivals. But he said he enjoyed the whole excursion. And when Glenn Shattuck, who played Otho, died in 2010, they played Deo at his funeral. Burton ended up battling the studio over that scene. They wanted it cut. But they, as we mentioned earlier, they were also agitating for the name House Ghosts. Speaking of which, what the hell's going on with the title of this film? A thing that I did not pick up on until I was like a teenager. The fact that Beetlejuice is named after an actual star in the Orion constellation, the 9th brightest star in Earth's night sky, by the way. But his name is spelled completely differently. What's up with that? What's the deal with... Nope, we're not
Because
finishing that.
the way it's supposed to be spelled looks terrible.
Sure
on the
does.
poster.
Yeah. Way grabbier to be Beetlejuice,
Beetle guys. I didn't realize it was a real place until weirdly recently, because I remember it being referenced in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that Douglas Adams had made that up too. So
It does sound like it would have been.
Who wants to take Danny Elfman? I'm going to cue up the video.
special mention must go out, of course, to Danny Elfman, the curiously ripped Danny Elfman.
Right?
And his work scoring the film. So Danny Elfman said, I wrote music before I saw a rough cut of anything. He was talking to GQ actually this year, 2023. I had a little extra time and thought I'd get started. I read the script. I wrote a bunch of music. It all got thrown away. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, this is not the movie I was imagining in my head. This is something else completely.
It was a really deceptively hard score to play. I didn't realize it at the time. Just the simplicity of really strict time. So half the brass section going off beats like that. And there's a tendency to want to let it swing. And it's like, no. And poor tuba player is like turning blue without a break, just like on and on and on and on and on. They tried to record it in England, like for a best of album. The conductor in England looked at the score and they started playing it. He picked it up and he threw it on the floor and he said, "This is unplayable." And it's like, I'm enjoying this.
Danny Elfman's so annoying.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I was waiting for everyone to stop so I could make that observation.
I love a lot. I mean, I love Nightmare Before Christmas so much, but I ended up watching like 3 movies that he scored right in a row. I think I talked about this on a different episode, but he has so many ticks that he uses over and over again. And it's like, I mean, I think of that throwaway gag on Family Guy where they have him like, they like cuts to him doing like in front of a symphony or whatever, and Stewie just goes, "That's enough, Danny Elfman."
So Elfman also said, "I didn't realize in hindsight how lucky I was that when we did these movies, nobody was paying attention to us. They were small enough budgets that we could do them, and nobody from the studio ever showed up saying, 'Can you play us some of the music?' There were no presentations. It was just Tim and I. It was really kind of like 2 kids in the kindergarten class, and the teacher leaves, and they're just like running their own class."
Their friendship is really adorable. Those 2 little weirdos found each other. Danny Elfman with his like closet of haunted Victorian dolls in his home studio.
Made for just $13 million, Beetlejuice went on to gross $75 million in the U.S. and spawned an animated series and a stage show at Universal Studios theme park. It also won the Academy Award for Best Makeup in 1989. So all worked out for that moss gatherer.
Academy Award-winning film Beetlejuice.
And it triumphed over some pretty heavy hitters, including Rick Baker's work for Coming to America.
Which is, where he's got Eddie Murphy playing the 4 guys in the barber shop.
And Arsenio Hall playing multiple characters.
Yeah, so the fact that Michael Keaton's Moss makeup won. I wasn't able to find out who did the prosthetics for the when they stretch their face, when she stretches her face into like the bird beak thing, because that's like one of the more indelible images in that movie for me.
See, and this is all stuff that I really, as a kid, just creeped me
Yeah,
out.
but it's like
I know it could be
cartoony creepy. Again, Orchard Haunted House. Come on.
It is legitimately funny that Alec Baldwin literally pushes his hand through the back of his head to give him like the chicken grill.
Yeah. Oh man, and I think all of that was just Tim Burton drawing, like just because that's one of the other things that Alec Baldwin was like. He was like, Tim didn't really give us any direction. He was just constantly sketching. I would just like look up from his sketchbook and be like, yeah, just go back down and keep drawing.
Following the success of Beetlejuice, Warner Brothers greenlit Tim Burton's version of Batman with Michael Keaton in the lead role. And by 1990, there was also a public announcement of a sequel, Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, with Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Jeffrey Jones, and Catherine O'Hara all agreeing to reprise their original roles. But then Warner Brothers, the same folks who wanted to rename it House Ghosts, offered Tim Burton total creative control on Batman Returns, and so he and Keaton went off to do that instead. They chose wisely.
And meanwhile, in between, we got Beetlejuice the Animated Series, which one of the great loves of my life. And that launched in 1989 when I was 8 years old and ran for 4 seasons. The show followed the wacky adventures of Beetlejuice and Lydia Dietz, who are now on friendlier terms and voiced by different people. It was actually really well received, winning a Daytime Emmy that it shared with The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, and a few of its voice actors later went on to do voices in Fox's X-Men cartoon, which also rules.
Yes.
Probably the craziest story that we could find about the animated series is that in 1991, 14-year-old Sharon Chamberlain, who was a fan of Beetlejuice, had an idea for the animated series. Her first attempt to contact the company behind the show which was called Nelvana. That's unfortunate. Was unsuccessful, but she found contact information for Geffen Pictures and sent her proposal there. Geffen forwarded the idea, and Nelvana bought the pitch from her for $250, or about $560 in today's money. The episode, Brides of Funkenstein, which I think is a P-Funk reference, aired as episode 9 of season 3. So thank you, Sharon Chamberlain, for all of your footwork.
Kind of ripped her off, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she lives on. She's getting the TMI
Residuals?
boost.
Oh man, I was correct. It is P-Funk. That was previous background singers for Sly and the Family Stone that George Clinton put together, and one of them, Lynn Mabry, I thought her name looked familiar. She is one of the backing singers in Stop Making Sense. Oh, so there's her and Bernie Worrell. So there's I will forever love the fact that there's two members of P-Funk in Stop Making Sense.
That's delightful.
So Beetlejuice 2 is finally on the way. Production began in May, but with the SAG and WGA strike, who's to say how this thing was originally supposed to come out next year. I don't think that's going to happen. It's been written by Seth Grahame-Smith, the author of Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Remember when those were things?
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
The likelihood of this not being terrible just went way down.
Well, Grahame-Smith wrote the screenplay on the condition that Michael Keaton would return. Winona Ryder is set to come back, and so is Tim Burton. And along with them, Jenna Ortega, newly minted Scream Queen Jenna Ortega, best known for Wednesday, and her role in the rebooted Scream franchise. Justin Theroux, for some reason, probably taking over the Alec Baldwin role. Willem Dafoe, Monica Bellucci as Beetlejuice's wife, and thankfully Catherine O'Hara reprising her role as Delia.
No, nobody can do it better.
Yeah,
honestly,
and she's still killing it. It's not like she's retired or anything. She's
Can I just say one of my biggest memories of the animated series is that the show would intercut these weird, like, computer animated commercials, like, from the Afterlife world, like, throughout the show. One of them was Jean Lafitte's Feet Treats for Happy Feets. And there was like a whole jingle to go along with it. They were literally like milk bones that your feet would eat. It was. I don't know why.
So gross.
I do not know why that has stuck in my memory, but that's probably somebody's birthday or phone number that I cannot remember. But I do remember Jean Lafitte's Feet Treats for Happy Feet.
That's so funny. Famous.
It's like kind of ungoogleable.
It is. Famous French privateer pirate. I think there's a bar named after him in New Orleans. This sequel is one of the craziest long-awaited things to come out of Hollywood. Warren Scarron, who we mentioned was the co-writer on the original film, finished a script called Beetlejuice in Love that was actually mentioned in his obituary when he died. They were like, he recently completed his final screenplay for Beetlejuice in Love. That treatment featured a composer who dies while proposing to his girlfriend, and then this guy meets Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice, however, immediately falls in love with his would-be fiancée and attempts to escape the afterlife to find her. But that is not even the most famous unproduced Beetlejuice sequel.
So the much more notorious sequel, which we've mentioned once before here, Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, which sounds like it could have been an Elvis movie.
Yeah.
And that worries me. The Deeses travel to Hawaii to open a resort designed by Otho. I'm liking this more and more with every word that I read, which, being built on the classic ancient burial ground, gets Beetlejuice involved when the spirits awoken by the development hire him to sabotage the resort.
Isn't this a Brady Bunch special? Isn't this like...
You're the Brady Bunch guy.
Yeah.
While he's there, just while he's on vacation, Beetlejuice enters a surfing competition, attempts to marry Lydia again. Give it up, guy. Takes part in a running gag where he goes incognito as an oil tycoon named Monty Exxon. And
That's great.
By the end of the film, transforms into a wrathful creature named Jucifer.
Also good.
Also,
yeah,
a
I was
good
gonna say a
band.
Doom band.
Summons dinosaurs and turns normal people into Neanderthals. That script went through a number of rewrites, as if we couldn't tell just by reading that short description, including at one point by Kevin Smith of Clerks and Mallrats and Chasing Amy fame. Some people have suggested that Burton pitched the whole thing as a lark. Honestly, this sounds a little bit like the Gladiator sequel that Nick Cave
hell
wrote.
yeah! Except that sounds f***ing awesome, and it's a travesty it never got made. Jordan, if you're unfamiliar,
Yes.
I don't think I know
he
this.
basically pitched a sequel where
Maximus goes to the afterlife.
yeah, he's like in hell and like has to like fight his way through hell, and then I think it ends with him like he successfully escapes hell and becomes like an immortal soldier, and it was going to end with this like long montage of him like fighting in every war, which is
That's
cool as hell.
hilarious.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's like Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump when they show that all his ancestors had died in every American war.
Why'd you gotta
hate
bring
you.
the vibe down like that? Yeah, it's really funny. Kevin Smith's like one degree of separation from Tim Burton because he was tapped at one point to write the script for Burton's Superman movie, and that is where the famous John Peters of A Star Is Born fame being obsessed with giant spiders comes from.
We were just talking
Yeah,
about
because
that.
it's-
yeah.
That leads directly to Wild Wild
Exactly.
West.
Well, so this all comes from like one of the. Remember when Kevin Smith was doing like proto podcasts where he would just like show up at a lecture hall and just talk about his wacky misadventures in Hollywood? This story comes from one of these things where he talks about being in a room with John Peters, and he's working on the Superman script with that Nick Cage when Nick Cage was starring and Tim Burton was going to direct, and Peters was producing, and he was like, "All right, I'll tell you what you got to do. You got to have Superman fight a giant spider at the end of the movie." And Kevin Smith was like, "Why?" And Peters was like,
question.
"Well, they're the most deadly predator, like for their size," or he said something ridiculous like that. And that's and then Smith is now talking to, I think, Warner Brothers or whatever studio is. He was like, "Yeah, I met with John Peters, and it was kind of a weird meeting." And they go, "Did he bring up the giant spider?" And he was like, "Yeah, what's with that guy and giant spiders?" And then, so of course, the button on this anecdote that Kevin Smith is telling is that years later he goes to see Wild Wild West, which is produced by John Peters, and sure enough, they fight a giant spider at the end. That story gets funnier because in Licorice Pizza, the most recent PTA film, John Peters is played by Bradley Cooper, and there's a line when he's talking to the kid played by Philip Seymour Hoffman's son. He says, "You know what? I like you. We're the same. We're both from the streets." That is apparently something John Peters said to Kevin Smith. So this Kevin Smith's like one interaction with John Peters has given us such a wealth of things. And that fucking Superman, Nick Cage as Superman fighting a giant spider, made it into The Flash this year. Spoilers. There's like a whole thing with like this multiverse bit in Flash, and they go and show a bunch of different Supermen. They show Christopher Reeves, they show George Reed, and then they show Nick Cage fighting a giant spider. All done CGI. It all looks it's an abomination. But there is a secret, the Kevin Smith's giant spider story with John Peters is like one of the most influential oral history bits in American cinema in the past 30 years. So drink that in.
I love this unified theory of Kevin Smith.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, anyway, so this screenwriter Jonathan Gems said at one point that he didn't actually know if Burton was being serious about any of this. He said, "Tim just thought it would be funny to match the surfing backdrop of a beach movie with some sort of German expressionism, because they're totally wrong together." But he got distracted by the Batman movies, and then I guess there was a protracted rights battle with Geffen that scotched the sequel for the intervening 2 decades. Because in 2011, writers David Katzenberg and the aforementioned Seth Grahame-Smith were reported to be taking their shot at it. And then that draft was rewritten by a guy named Mike Vukadinovich. I don't know
Mike
Yes,
Vukadinovich.
of the Moscow Vukadinoviches. A few years later, in 2015, Winona Ryder confirmed to Seth Meyers that this movie was happening, although in her characteristically and adorably kind of daffy way, she didn't really seem like she should be talking about it. I think she was confused as to whether or not she could publicly talk about it. And of course, it didn't happen in 2015. And then as recently in 2019, Tim Burton was doing press for Dumbo, and somebody asked him about the Beetlejuice 2 thing, and he was like, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But here we are.
I just want to say, living in Atlanta like I do, I have a bunch of friends who work sort of in the industry, and several of whom did some work on Stranger Things and got to work with Winona Ryder. And one of them said very lovingly, when I asked, what is Winona Ryder like? He kind of threw his head back, looked at the ceiling and said, oh, Winona, she is such a sweet bird lost in a house.
That scans.
And I think about that at least once a week.
Yeah. Well, Jordan, this takes us into your personal connection with the Beetlejuice musical.
That is right. But we did get Beetlejuice the musical from director Alex Timbers and composer and lyricist Eddie Perfect and Anthony King, who co-wrote the book, my friend's husband. They started work on it in 2016, and Alex Timbers probably is best known for his insanely lavish adaptation of Moulin Rouge on Broadway, or on the stage, I should say, which premiered in Boston at the cost of $28 million. I've seen it several times. It is pretty spectacular. When Beetlejuice the musical opened in D.C. in 2018, it was at an insane cost of $21 million. And due to the technology involved, the creators told the Washington Post that it could not have been done 10 years ago. And Eddie Perfect also composed a musical about King Kong, which is awesome. And apparently started writing songs for Beetlejuice as early as 2014, 4 full years before the show started production.
I think he wrote some of the songs on spec, which is insane. It was just like,
Whoa,
here's some songs
yeah.
about Beetlejuice in case anyone wants to make a musical out of it. I don't know, just putting that out there.
Just, yeah, anyone? The show opened in April 2019 at the Winter Garden Theater on Broadway, but was not an immediate hit with critics or fans at first. But one thing that drastically helped the show was a major moment on TikTok in late 2019. I had never even heard of TikTok in late 2019. Fans in particular glommed onto the song Say My Name, not, I imagine, the Destiny's Child song,
Sadly, no.
and began lip-syncing and remixing it en masse, propelling it to the top of the social media internet echo chamber. But despite this, it was announced that due to the show's initial losses, Beetlejuice would be replaced by The Music Man, despite the fact that it earned 8 Tony Award nominations, including Best Musical. A Save Beetlejuice hashtag trended on Twitter, and there were multiple petitions launched, and then COVID-19 shut down the whole of Broadway anyway.
What did we learn?
Heigl, take us home.
Yeah, it was nominated for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Tonys. Lost every single one.
The show seems like it can't catch
I think
a
it was
break.
just in San Francisco, and I did not see it. It's played in Seoul.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, just like taking an annoying guy and making him even more annoying because now he has to sing all kinds of stuff. Like taking Beetlejuice and making him into a theater guy, like a theater kid. That's awful. He's already like, what's the de-evolution of a guy with stand-up comic energy? It's a theater kid, an improv guy. Well, lastly,
It truly is the gleification of the cure.
yes, that's your soundbite. Just put that in. Lastly, when Netflix launched in 1998, the first DVD they ever mailed out was a copy of Beetlejuice.
We should have led with that factoid. That's incredible. I love that.
Well, folks, thank you for listening. This has been Too Much Information with very special guest Mykal Alder June, all the way up from Atlanta. It's 11 o'clock for you guys. You've had a very busy day, and I talked a lot about John Peters wanting to put giant spiders in every movie. Thanks for taking the time.
And also Tim Burton's massive
Oh, yeah.
dog.
Yeah, Tim Burton's hog. If you want to tweet at us about this episode, please do so using the hashtag Tim Burton's Hog.
Tim Burton's pale goth hog.
We'll catch you next time here on TMI. It's Mummy July. Oh, mummies all the time.
Now entering its 6th proud month. That joke.
You guys got a farewell? Can I stop recording now?
We're good.
Too Much Information was a production of iHeartRadio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Mykal Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
With original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.